5.4 is the product to sum. And sum to product formulas. Like I said, we've got one objective that's going to talk about the product to sum formulas first. And they are written on page 619 in your book. It says if I have a product, it says I'm taking the sine of one angle times the sine of a second angle. Then that can be rewritten as a product. It's the cosine of alpha minus beta minus the cosine of alpha plus beta. And if we have the cosine of the two angles, that's the cosine of alpha minus beta plus the cosine of alpha plus beta. So as you can see, those two are very alike. The only difference when I'm taking the sine of an angle times the sine of a second angle is that I subtract the cosine. And if I'm doing the cosines of the two angles, multiplying the cosines of the two angles, then I add those sum and differences. Now, if we have the sine of the first angle times the cosine of the second angle, when I use the sine and cosine together, that uses the sine, the product and difference of the sine formulas. And if I have the cosine of the first angle times the sine of the second angle, it's the exact same, except again, where I added the two sines together, now I'm going to subtract them. Okay, those are very difficult to remember because they're so very close to the same. And so I'm pretty much guaranteeing those will be on a formula sheet. Okay, so you might want to write yourself a formula sheet so that you can look at those as you're doing your homework. You don't have to try to memorize them. Okay. Again, those are on page 619, so that you can write those down. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the sum to product formula, so it's all on one page, so you can use this notes page as your formula page when you're doing your homework, okay? And then we'll do the example in just a minute. Is that okay with y'all? Make it a little easier. So the formulas for objective 2 are for the sum to product. No. Would be nice, but that's not the way it works. These are on page 620 if you need to look them up later. So this one is taking the sine of one angle plus the sine of another angle. And the formula for that is that 2 times the sine of alpha plus beta divided by 2 times the cosine of alpha minus beta divided by 2. So the average of the two angles. So it's 2 times the sine of the average of the two angles times the cosine of the average of the two angles. Not the average, because there's subtraction. Never mind. Formula does say alpha minus beta. And if I do the difference, so I've taken the sine of the first one minus the sine of the second. Again, that's pretty much the same. The difference is that when I take the sine value, I do the alpha minus beta, and when I take the cosine of it, it's the alpha plus the beta divided by 2. Just swap the angles. cosine of alpha minus the cosine, plus the cosine of beta is 2 times the cosine of alpha plus beta over 2 times the cosine of alpha minus beta over 2. So when we have the cosine of two different angles added together, we don't use the sine function in it. When we do the cosine of alpha minus the cosine of beta, we still use the same two functions, but this time I'm going to use the sine of the two of them. And it's a negative. Negative 2 times the sine of alpha plus beta divided by 2 times the sine of alpha minus beta divided by 2. Okay? Those are your 8 formulas. Again, on these, like I say, if you'll put these all down on the one page and then use this page while you're doing the homework. Yes? 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 Like this afternoon. Before I leave today, I'll have this on YouTube. All right, so let's look at examples. So check point 1. Okay, so it just wants us to express as a sum or difference. So we're not like doing anything with it, we're just changing the way it looks. So part A is the sine of 5x times the sine of 2x. And part B wants us to do the same thing to the cosine of 7x times the cosine of x. So I've got the sine of two different angles here. So I'm going to use this formula that says I'm going to say 1/2 times the cosine of alpha minus beta minus the cosine of alpha plus beta. There's my general formula for the sine of two angles that are multiplied together. Now, which one's alpha? 5x. And which one's beta? The 2x. So you just go through and substitute that stuff in. So I've got 1/2 times the cosine of 5x minus 2x minus the cosine of 5x plus 2x. And then you're going to simplify that. And so it becomes 1/2 times the cosine of 3x minus the cosine of 7x. Okay? Any questions about that? The next one's the cosine of two different angles. So again, my general formula is 1/2. And I've got the cosine of alpha minus beta plus the cosine of alpha plus beta. That's my general formula. You may want to write it down for yourself to make it a little bit easier. And then remind yourself which one's alpha, 7x, and which one's beta, the 1x. So that becomes 1/2 times the cosine of 7x minus x plus the cosine of 7x plus x. So that simplifies into the cosine of 6x plus the cosine of 8x. That's all I want you to do. Be able to use it to change the way it looks. Okay? Just look at the formula. You just have to look at the formula. Look at what I'm doing. I'm taking a cosine and a cosine. All right. example 2 or checkpoint 2, wants us to do the exact same thing but work the other direction. It wants us to express each one as a product. So, part A wants us to take the sine of 7x plus the sine of 3x, and part B wants me to take the cosine of 3x plus the cosine of 2x, and it wants me to change them, instead of being a sum, it wants me to change them into a product. So again, I look at my formula here. I've got the sine of two different angles, right? And so the sine of two different angles added together is changed into 2 times the sine of alpha plus beta divided by 2 times the cosine of alpha minus beta divided by 2. That's just my general formula that you just wrote down a minute ago. Again, you may want to identify for yourself which one's alpha and which one's beta. And then you just plug those values in. So I've got 2 times the sine of 7x plus 3x divided by 2, and the cosine of 7x minus 3x divided by 2. So that simplifies into 2 times the sine of 10x divided by 2 times the cosine of 4x divided by 2. And you do want to go ahead and simplify that a little bit further. That's 2 times the sine of 5x times the cosine of 2x. Just plugging it in. Now the second one, part B, takes the cosine of two different angles. So my formula says if I've got the cosine of two different angles that are added together, that turns into 2 times the cosine of alpha plus beta divided by 2 times the cosine of alpha minus beta divided by 2. And as you saw, I just picked up the book and I looked at my formula. That's what I need you to do is on your notes page, just use that while you're doing the homework. Okay? Hardest part of this is recognizing what they gave you to start with so that you can figure out what formula to use. This is alpha, this is beta. So I've got 2 times the cosine of 3x plus 2x divided by 2 times the cosine of 3x minus 2x divided by 2. So when I simplify, that gives me 2 times the cosine of 5x divided by 2 times the cosine of 1x divided by 2. And since those don't reduce down into whole numbers, I'm going to leave them just like that. Any questions? Then, of course, they want you to be able to use these to verify identities. So, checkpoint 3.